Today we're talking with Huffington Post journalist Lee Speigel about some of the top UFO stories of 2012 on this special episode of Spacing Out. Greetings everyone and welcome to Spacing Out. I'm Jason McClellan.
And I'm Maureen Elsberry. Thanks for joining us today for a special edition of Spacing Out. We're talking with Lee Speigel on the show today.
Lee is a journalist at the Huffington Post where he mainly writes about UFOs. He's explored the UFO phenomenon for decades. Lee recently wrote an article titled UFOs and Unexplained Phenomena, Top 10 Stories of 2012. He took some time to talk with us about his top story picks in today's interview, so here it is. Lee, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. It's great to have you back on.
Thank you, guys, my fellow seekers of truth.
Well, Lee, we're excited to talk to you today. I know you recently wrote an article for the Huffington Post doing your sort of recap of the year's biggest stories, 2012's biggest stories, the paranormal and UFO stories. So we haven't done that yet on the show, and we wanted to do that, and I thought, who better to have on than our friend Lee Speigel?
Well, who better to steal the stories from than Lee Speigel, right?
That's right. You're the best to steal the stories from. And everybody does, but at least when I steal your stories, I get it right.
That's right. That's right. And I guess I'm going to admit to you that I even steal some of your stories.
Well, that's why we work so well together, Lee. Well, speaking of our working together and our friendship, I want to start off by talking about a story that made a lot of headlines early in the year in 2012, and that is the story of the fleet of orbs over the Luxor Casino in Las Vegas.
Gee, and I wonder why you want to talk about that.
Well, I want to talk about that, number one, because I love Las Vegas, but number two, you and I were actually in Las Vegas when this happened, and you were staying at the Luxor Casino, and you even recorded your own video of this stuff. So I'd love for you to tell us all about this story of the fleet of orb UFOs over the Luxor.
Several people that night in Las Vegas, when you and I were there on some other business, people from different locations were videotaping what they claimed were UFOs, strange lights in the sky doing very strange patterns. And you and I happened to be, stuffing ourselves at a buffet during the activity. We had no idea what was going on.
That's right.
It was just a few feet away. And after dinner, I went back to the Luxor, which is the hotel in the theme of Egyptian pyramid. So it's this gigantic glass-made pyramid hotel, and at the very top of the hotel it's called the Sky Beam, and what this is this gigantic projection. I don't know how many millions of kilowatts, but the beam of light is projected every night. It goes straight up into the heavens, and I believe it's one of the few lights from Earth that can be seen and photographed from outer space.
That's right.
It's so powerful. And when I got back to the hotel and I got out of the cab, I just happened to look up, because it's kind of what you do when you're there at the Luxor. You kind of look up in it in awe, and all of these weird things were swirling around the top of the pyramid at the bottom of the base part of the Sky Beam. Things were darting in and out, and I mean, I could tell that they were probably alive because I've seen things like that before, but there were so many of them, and they were different shapes and sizes. And luckily, I remembered that in my bag, I had a little digital camera that could record video. So I pulled it out, and I just kind of aimed it up, and I shot about a minute or so of these things flying around, turned the camera off, put it back in my bag, and didn't think about it until I got back to New York, like days later, because this whole UFO thing didn't even break in the news until a couple of days later. So I was back in New York, and I was looking for stories, and I started seeing headlines, Sin City UFOs, and I'm looking at the date, and I went, wait a minute, look at the calendar. Wait, I was there on that date. And then I started, and I put it all together, and I realized that people were seeing UFOs when you and I were there. And then I realized, wait a minute, I took a video. And I went for my camera, stuck it into the computer, and there were my own personal versions of the UFOs. And so I ended up using part of my video in the story, in which I used like 3 different videos taken from by 3 different people that night in Las Vegas, and I happened to be one of them. And one of the people that I interviewed about what these possibly could be was TV reporter George Knapp, the ace TV reporter, the multi-Emmy award-winning TV reporter who broke the whole Area 51 story to America. And George said to me, well, those of you who don't live in Vegas, this might seem like an amazing thing, but those of us who are here, we see this all the time. It comes under the heading of the 4 Bs: bats, bugs, birds, and balloons. And so that's what you were seeing. I don't remember seeing any balloons, but certainly the bats and bugs and birds is what I captured on videotape. I will say that in the other 2 videos that I had seen, I think some of those showed balloons, because those were moving much slower in the sky and were forming different kinds of patterns. But it was amazing. I mean, the story went viral.
Yeah, it did.
And I just kind of happened to catch them purely by accident, and it actually was one of my top 10 stories of the year. Not because I was involved with it, but because of how people reacted to it.
Right.
You know, so crazy.
But you know what's funny is Jason and I had to go to Vegas right after that, pretty much, for another. It was a George Knapp actually event at the Atomic Testing Museum. And my room at the hotel we were staying at looked right out onto the Luxor. So, of course, I take the camera we brought, and I was filming it and looking for them, because this story had just broken out. I knew there were bugs and bats, but still was curious to see them. And now every time I go to Vegas, I am plagued with watching the Luxor beam for these 4 Bs, as you called them, which is, I mean, it's still neat to watch anyways, but unfortunately, people, not extraterrestrial. But Vegas seems to be sort of a hot spot for all the top stories this year. Again, back in September, I think September 22nd, we were back there again at the National Atomic Testing Museum for this event with all these military personnel, to where Colonel Charles Halt accused the government of having a secret agency and covering up the UFO subject. Tell us about that story, because that was in the top 10 as well.
Yeah, that was my my number 5 story, kind of right there in the middle. Colonel Halt was one of the many eyewitnesses involved in the famous Bentwaters UFO case that took place in London. I believe it was in 1980, 81, over Christmas time. That involved so many military eyewitnesses that the dual Bentwaters, it's a dual air base. It's a Great Britain has part of a base, and the Americans have the base. And I think that the American portion is the Bentwaters. And Chuck Halt was, at the time, he was the deputy base commander. And he was called out into the field because his men out there were seeing some strange things that were like, some of them were flying around the forest, moving throughout the trees, some landing, some shooting beams of light down to the ground. And you know, all of these things were going on. And while skeptics were like almost planning their explanations, and the explanation that they've been trying to foster on the world ever since then was that what all of these military, in some cases trained eyewitnesses were observing was the distant light of a lighthouse. And it's like, you know, how far do you have to go to stretch credibility when there's something that's just landed in a field, and some of your military people go out there and they actually touch the thing? This is a lighthouse beam? I mean, really, you know, you get to the point where there's a credibility problem here. But the thing about Colonel Halt was, and at the National Atomic Testing Museum event that we were all together at, he basically came out and said that he believes that the United States government and the military has been covering up UFOs, and not only that, but that there's some kind of ongoing behind the scenes top secret agency or organization within the government where UFO information is supposed to be funneled to and then determined about how it's going to be processed and how whether information is going to be debunked or not or whatever they do with the material. And he came right out and basically said,
folks, there's an agency, very close held, compartmentalized agency that's been investigating this for years. They get their sources from NSA, DIA, CIA, Air Force Intelligence, Army Intelligence, FBI, you name it.
And that was a pretty bold thing of him to say after so many years. And this is one of the most credible guys. But, you know, again, the skeptics and the debunkers, they'll just try and rip him apart like they do with most people like that, simply because it's part of their job, that's what they have to do.
Right, but like you pointed out, I mean, this is the colonel, you know, a highly credible person, you would think, but it doesn't matter to the skeptics. This is the colonel, but when a colonel comes out and says something like this, then they're not reliable.
Yeah, well, and you know, that wasn't even going to be the thrust of my story that became the #5 story. Right. I originally was going there because I wanted to hear, of course, what he had to say. I didn't know that he was going to make this accusation about the United States government. I primarily went there because I wanted to see what Colonel Bill Coleman was going to talk about. You know, he was the former public, I think the public information officer in charge of Project Blue Book. And he had promised me personally that he was going to make some big revelation there in front of the audience, and it was going to shake everybody up, and it was going to change everybody's perspective on UFOs. And he said he wasn't going to tell me what this big revelation was going to be. He didn't want to tell me over the phone, but he promised that when I got to Las Vegas and we got together and we would do another interview, he would tell me first, because I needed to write my story to get it ready for Huffington Post. And then when we all met, all of us got together at the museum the night before the big UFO lecture there. I went over to him and I said, you know, Colonel Coleman, could we maybe just go sit someplace quiet and let's continue that conversation? He went, oh, no, I have nothing to say to you. And I went, I'm sorry, what? Now, I've decided that that it wouldn't be fair for me to give you the revelation before I give it to anyone else. So you're just going to have to wait until the lecture tomorrow and listen to what I have to say to everybody. And I was a little pissed at first. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm here. What the hell? I can kind of put my story together and I can get whatever quotes he's going to give to the audience and I can slip some things in and then I can file the story and be done with it. So as both of you know, because we were all there together, when it came time for Colonel Coleman to get up there and start talking about, you know, his own UFO encounter that he had in the 1950s, which was a riveting encounter with an amazing flying saucer, according to his description, a great story. But when it got to the point for this revelation, and at the end of his speech, he said, well, folks, I want to tell you something, and here it comes. You ever wonder why extraterrestrials probably aren't revealing themselves to Earthlings right now? And I'm thinking, all right, well, here it comes, whatever it's going to be. It's because they know that down here on Earth, we have a lot of diseases. We tend to give colds to each other, and we spread our diseases to one another. And they have realized that they can't afford to take the risk to catch any human diseases from planet Earth. And so that's why they're not revealing themselves to us. Thank you for coming, folks. That's the end of my speech. And all of us who were there, who thought that he was going to give us something like spectacular, everybody looked at each other and went, what? What just happened here? And it turns out at the end of the lecture, the museum director, Alan Palmer, approached Coleman and said, what was that all about? What happened to your big revelation in this? First, you wouldn't give the information out to Lee Speigel after you promised it to him, and then you didn't give it out to the rest of the audience. What gives? And Coleman's explanation was, well, I decided as I was about to reveal my big story, I decided I'm going to wait and include it in my book that I'm writing. Yeah, really. Really, I heard that music too in my head. And luckily, maybe the next speaker that night, or maybe the second speaker after that, was Chuck Holt. And then he came up like gangbusters. And I thought, well, there's my story. There's my headline. All right, Chuck Holt. But really, it's like you never know what people are going to say or not say. And then then you get a guy like ex-Air Force Colonel Richard French, and this is in my top 10 list as well. And he was there that night, not as a speaker, but he was there with his wife just to watch the event. And here's a guy who told you folks, or who told he did an interview with you guys with Antonio Huneeus, and then in an interview he did with me, and I didn't know anything about this. He just blurted out during my interview. He said, most people think that there was one crash at Roswell, but I'm here to tell you that there were two.
The first UFO was actually shot down by an experimental U.S. airplane that was flying already, was already airborne on a special mission out of White Sands, New Mexico.
The reason that they crashed was because we shot them down. Wait a minute. Excuse me, my head is exploding here. What? What did you just say?
Yeah.
So it's like all these stories, some surprises, some not, some bats and birds and bugs.
Well, I keep running into you in Las Vegas, and
I know.
Both on the subject of both Roswell and the National Atomic Testing Museum, where, in fact, back in March, when you were at the Luxor and the bats and birds were in the Luxor Skybeam, we were there for the grand opening of the National Atomic Testing Museum's Area 51 exhibit. And one of your big stories was the Russian Roswell material that they have on display in the museum.
Amazing. And that was the reason why that I even went there in the first place, was because they were putting together the first ever museum exhibit on Area 51. They called it Area 51, I think, Myth or Reality. And so we were all there to cover the opening of this amazing exhibit. And I knew ahead of time that one of the things that was going to be put on exhibit was material that reported George Knapp. Again, George comes up because he was so instrumental in bringing Area 51 to everybody's consciousness. George went to the Soviet Union. There had been basically a UFO crash in the late 80s on a mountainside, and scientists quickly came in and examined debris that had been left from whatever it was that crashed in this hillside. Most of the stuff had just disintegrated, but they had come up with a lot of interesting pieces of materials that were sent to different laboratories for analysis. And George Knapp became friendly with the scientists, was invited over there. They gave him materials, and then he brought the materials back to the States. And now, in 2012, he was donating a lot of this material to be put on exhibit at the National Atomic Testing Museum. And so before the museum exhibit opened that particular night, before the press event, I was given a private walkthrough of the exhibit by Alan Palmer, the director of the museum. And we came upon the George Knapp exhibit. And the first thing that struck me was at the top of this museum case it was all encased in glass. Under the glass, there were vials, and inside the vials, there were little, very circular, tiny circular, like bead-like materials. But what really caught my eye was the description card that was sticking on top of the case, and it very, very clearly said, "Authentic alien artifact." And I went, wait a minute, what? Authentic alien artifact? And the reason why I get so excited or dumbfounded over stuff like this is because you got to put the dots together. I was standing in a building that is a national museum, one of only a handful. It's part of the Smithsonian Institution. So the questions are, why would the Smithsonian Institution have a museum in Las Vegas that's just opening up an exhibit about Area 51, a place that was never supposed to have existed in the minds of the public, with so many UFO related possible stories and testing of reverse engineered captured flying saucers and all those legends that people have heard about? Why would the Smithsonian have a museum about atomic testing with a new exhibit about Area 51, and part of that exhibit, something called authentic alien artifact? Like, wait a minute, how do all these dots connect? I mean, it was amazing. And so while I was there looking at this display, and I had my digital camera with me, and I asked Alan Palmer, I said, you know, this is pretty amazing. Can I take a couple of pictures of the display? He said, yeah, go ahead. And I took a few pictures. And we walked out of that room. We went to another section of the exhibit. And as I was taking a few pictures of something else, his museum curator came running up to me and said, no pictures, no pictures. You can't take any pictures here. And I said, well, why not? Because we're not allowing the press to take any pictures or videos, you know, before this is open, and probably even after. No cameras will be allowed into the exhibit. And I said, well, but if you want people to come in and spend money to go through your museum and through your exhibit, you have to promote it in a way that teases them, to entice them to want to come here. Well, yes, but we think that the whole perception of Area 51, the mystique about it, will be enough to draw people in. So you can't take any pictures. She went running away. And I turned to Alan. I said, look, you know, I don't want to get in between you and your curator, but, you know, I took some pictures back there of the authentic alien artifact. He said, don't worry about it. Use the pictures. And so at the top of my picture, at the top of my story, back in March, that's the picture that headlined my story, was the picture of the authentic alien artifact. You know, I was at the right place at the right time. You can never count on that with this stuff at all. You know, how do I know that I'm going to be sitting at a buffet with Jason McClellan when bats and bugs are flying around us that the whole world will be talking about 2 days later? You never know.
That's right.
You're a sneaky little monkey. You figured out how to get that in, but honestly, the National Atomic Testing Museum was a big portion of all this news last year. And
yeah.
I honestly think that they've done such great work bringing together all these lectures and, you know, having Seth Shostak out there, and a bunch of other people. I mean, they just did really great work last year. And hopefully we'll see more from them this year with even more groundbreaking stuff, but that has yet to be seen. And maybe the museum will become their traveling museum like they've planned, so more people will get to see the Area 51 museum.
It's a great exhibit. It's a great building. The people there are really great to work with. They're very accommodating. They're really friendly. They really go out of their way to make you feel at home, whether you're with the media or you're just you know, spending some dollars to come there to check the place out. I was very happy. That was one of the highlights for me last year, was just going there and getting to know the people who run the museum. They're just great folks.
I agree with you. That was one of my high points as well. They are fantastic people there, and I really do believe their hearts are in the right place. Karen Green, you know, the curator, and Alan Palmer, I think they both have the right mindset, and they both truly are looking for the truth, and they want people to question things that we previously thought we know about. And in presenting what they're presenting, I think they're encouraging people to think for themselves and look for answers. I think they've done a really good job with that, and kudos to them. They're really good at putting together really good events and getting quality speakers.
Yeah. I agree, and I didn't mean to like denigrate Karen at all, and I mentioned her before as the curator who said I shouldn't take any photographs, because I recognize she was doing her job. She was doing what she was supposed to do. And if it meant protecting the materials or promoting the mystique of the exhibit, fine. I have no problem with that. I wasn't going to argue with it at all. However, which way that would have gone, if Alan had said to me, you know, don't use the pictures, fine. I wouldn't have done it. So it just turned out the way it was. And so kudos to Karen as well. Yeah, I agree.
Well, I'd like to move on to a little bit of learning something new. You were talking about people that are seeking out the truth, going to all these amazing speakers, because we are, you know, running around like chickens with our heads cut off right now because we're planning the 2013 UFO Congress. And we just recently announced that, lo and behold, the one and only Lee Speigel will be hosting the event for us this year. So we're beyond excited about that, but we're also really looking forward to having everyone come out and try and seek out the truth. Like you say, truth seekers come, listen to all these people, and sort of what are you looking forward to coming up here in February?
I'll tell you about a couple of highlights already that I'm looking forward to. One of the speakers is Mark D'Antonio, who is the MUFON. He's like the official picture and video photo analyst for Mutual UFO Network. But the other thing about Mark that a lot of people don't know about is this is a very cool guy. And in the last year, I have used him and called on him for so many times for stories in which I needed an expert in videotape.
We hadn't noticed.
Well, you know, what can I say?
I agree with you, Lee. He's the guy to call on. Yeah. We're big fans of Mark. We really like Mark. Oh. He's such a great guy, and he's very controversial. A lot of people don't like him because they think he's a debunker, because you know, he has this amazing ability to explain things, and he's so knowledgeable with photo and video. It's amazing. He's such a valuable resource.
I have, whenever I've done any story, and I did many stories last year about videos, and as you know, it's like almost every day there's a new video or 10 new videos that show up on YouTube. Oh, look at this great flying saucer. Oh, look at these UFOs that are whizzing past the International Space Station. What could they be? And so I would call on Mark, and I would send him the video and say, Mark, take a look at these. Give me your quick analysis and let me put it in the story. But one of the things about Mark that is so cool is that in addition to being the MUFON photo and video analyst, he has a company called FX Models up in Connecticut. And what this guy does, he has government contracts. The Pentagon, Congress, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they will call on him and say, we need you to make a specific prototype of a new submarine we're going to test. And don't show it to anybody. And, you know, and he'll build these things and test them for the government. And so he's got all this amazing stuff. Just going on his website is an amazing adventure because he's got pictures of these things. And one of the things that he created is, I don't know if you remember the original television series, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. He created this incredible replica of the submarine, the Seaview, where it's in such immaculate detail. There are almost real people inside the submarine. And I'm putting this on record now, Mark, so be careful. I've made him promise me that with all the times that I've used him now in my stories, the only thing I want is I want him to put me, a likeness of me, inside the Seaview submarine.
Wow.
We actually got a little bit of a sneak peek of a model he was building for a movie that's coming out here. I don't know when it's coming out, but in the future. And it's just incredible the amount of detail he puts in the work. So that's definitely a talk. I mean, I've seen him speak before, and it was one of my favorite talks at that time, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him again. Another person you cover in your stories a lot, or use as a source, is our mutual friend Ben Hansen from Sci-Fi's Fact or Faked. And we have officially, just of last week, so we'll announce this, Ben is our special guest all week, and he is coming out to host with our new sponsor, Night Optics USA, a very cool night vision sky watch. So and they're going to have the equipment there. They're going to be testing it all week. You're able to go into the vendor room and check it out. So that's going to be super fun. You better come out for that one.
Oh yeah, Ben Hansen is a great guy. You know, the former lead investigator and star of the Sci-Fi Channel's Fact or Faked. The guy is great. He knows his stuff. And again, I like talking about the little known things about people's backgrounds. That he's a former FBI special agent. I mean, really, he knows his stuff. He knows how to bring down the bad guys.
But Lee, you keep pointing out all these people's government ties. That means they can't be trusted. They're working for the government.
Well, who's to say I can be trusted?
Well, I know you work for the government too, so do I, but so does Maureen. But.
Let's not start feeling all the conspiracy theories, guys. Calm down. But
I'll tell you, another guy who I'm really looking forward to seeing, and we're old friends, is nuclear physicist Stan Friedman. Now, Stan Friedman, it'll be great because I've never introduced Stan for any kind of an event before. And so this will be the first time.
Have you been practicing it in front of the mirror?
I have, yeah. And I don't want to give it to you now. I don't want to give it away. But I will probably tell the story when I introduce him about the first time I ever met Stan Friedman. The very first thing I ever did in this whole crazy UFO field was in 1975. And I don't even want to know how old or young you guys were in 1975. Won't even ask.
Thank you, Lee. You're kind.
Negative years.
Okay. In 1975, the very first thing I ever did was a documentary vinyl record called UFOs, The Credibility Factor, in which I gathered the voices of scientists, military people, astronauts, totally credible people to come on record for the first time and talk about their mutual UFO experiences and beliefs. And again, 1975, the very first person I interviewed for my album, and in fact, the very first person I ever interviewed for anything, was Stan Friedman. And that was in 75. I had to, in order to do it, I went out to California. I was planning a trip to do a trip around the country to interview as many people as I could in one shot for my album. So I started in California, and that's where he was living at the time. And he was the first nuclear physicist I ever met. He welcomed me into his home. And when you talk to Stan Friedman today, he talks like and is the same man he was in 1975. He hasn't really changed his stance. He's the most consistent, down-to-earth, adamant person about UFOs. When he says some UFOs are somebody else's interplanetary spacecraft, he believes it. And he can back it up. And I don't think I've ever seen him lose a debate on the subject.
I don't think he's changed his facial hair since then either.
Well, he hasn't changed his facial hair. It's just a little grayer. But I just admire his tenacity, his longevity, and the fact that I'm going to get a chance finally to actually introduce him somewhere is, for me, a real treat. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, awesome. We are looking forward to having you, like we said, and that the International UFO Congress, for all you folks watching, is February 26th through March 3rd at the Fort McDowell Resort in Fountain Hills. And guarantee a good time if you come out, and you get to meet all of us and hang out and talk UFOs. And you can find out more at ufocongress.com.
Lee, we're really excited about it. We're so happy to have you there this year. That's going to be a lot of fun for us. We're going to get to hang out with you and get into some trouble.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it and meeting a lot of old friends and making new friends, getting involved and embroiled in controversies and seeing what kind of UFO crystal sculptures will they be selling this year.
Hey, and one more thing. You still owe me a copy of that 1975 UFO album. So you better bring it.
Didn't I leave you one?
No.
I thought I did.
No, me either. You promised, but it never came through. So.
2 CDs.
Okay.
This album.
Okay. You got them. I'll either bring them, or send them before I come there.
We won't let you leave until we have our copies. But Lee, thanks so much. This has been fun. We love having you on the show, and I'm sure
Are we done? Is that it? That's it?
Well, for now, I have a feeling there's going to be a little more stuff we'll probably do with you at the Congress, because we're going to be doing some stuff for the show at the Congress. So
yeah,
we'll be sure to bug you then, and we'll talk some more. But this has been great, Lee. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, guys. I always love talking to you. You know that.
We do, Lee. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Okay.
We're grateful to Lee for taking the time to talk with us about some of his picks for the top UFO stories of 2012. And Maureen and I are happy to announce that we will be presenting our top UFO-related stories of 2012 at the International UFO Congress on February 27th. So check out ufocongress.com for more information on that. Well, that's all for this episode of Spacing Out. Be sure to visit openminds.tv for all the latest news.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we always enjoy your feedback, so post comments below on the video on YouTube, or you can always email us at contact@openminds.tv. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Maureen Elsberry.
And I'm Jason McClellan. We will see you in the future.